So in this exercise, I'm gonna go into external rotation. So I'm gonna be loaded into external rotation and then do an eccentric load on internal rotation. Okay, so all I have is this little thing right here that makes it so that way I can actually pivot around it. It's just a little slider under my elbow. And I'm gonna make sure my angle on the machine, the cable is gonna be pulling me down into max internal. So this is max internal for me. And right in here, I'm just gonna go into external as far as I can, and then slowly on the internal. The reason why I like this exercise though, is because a lot of throwers, when they try to load external rotation, I'll show you right after this set, then when they try to load it themselves without using a machine and having an anchor point for their elbow. So imagine, this is my anchor point and I'm able to go like this. The humeral head inside my socket is actually staying in one place and it's going into max external rotation there. A lot of guys, when they try to load external rotation standing up, it's possible if you have really good awareness, but most of the time they go like this. And so their elbow will slide forward, they'll move their spine into extension, and they think that they're getting max external rotation from the humeral head, but they're really not. And so for this exercise, I would recommend 3 sets of 5 per side. Again, just making sure you're doing both sides just because. And then making sure that you can also prioritize it however you want. So if external rotation, you know that's the thing that you lack, then maybe you can do this exercise this way, right? Where I'm loading it into external rotation as far as I can, holding it for a second, and then eccentrically loading into internal rotation. Or you can also go the other way where you're actually, so I would just flip on this side of the camera, and all I would do is, from right here now, I would load myself into internal rotation and then eccentrically load myself into external rotation. As I do that, I'll probably be able to get just a little bit more because the weight will be pulling me back there. But because it's heavy, I'm still gonna be sending a force stimulus to my shoulder. So I'm not just gonna let it passively rip me. I'm gonna make sure that I'm contracting as I do that, okay? So again, that'd be 3 sets of 5 per side. For this exercise, we have external rotation, pails and rails, okay? So what I'm gonna do, I'm standing for this because I still have a good anchor point on the rack. You can also do this on the ground if needed, but then you're gonna need some yoga blocks to put underneath your hand as you progressively do it. For the sake of time, I'm gonna go up on the rack right here, good anchor point for my elbow. I wanna make sure this bone is straight, my humeral head is right inside the socket in a straight line. I'm not gonna be coming out here to do it. And I'm also gonna make sure that when I do my rails contraction, I'm not extending at my spine in order to get more, okay? So what I'm gonna do is press into the rack for 5 seconds, okay? 3, 4, 5. Now when I lift off, I don't want to exaggerate anything from my spine. I don't want to compensate anywhere. I'm just pulling off as far as I can, as hard as I can, keeping that anchor point down, and then boom, press right in. And then go through it again. Now in this exercise, I promise you, if you actually go really hard, you will most likely cramp, okay? Especially if you're new to it, but that's okay. You just gotta fight the cramp and go through it. In my opinion, that cramp stimulus is just telling you you're not used to sending force like that to that area. So it's perfectly okay to go through that, all right? Now, obviously, if it gets an extreme pain and you physically can't, you're gonna have to stop, but I try to fight it as long as possible. I'm cramping right now. As long as I possibly can. Good, right in there, okay? Now, that's gonna be prioritizing external rotation of the shoulder. I would do this for a real training stimulus, 3 sets of 5 for 5 to 8 seconds, and I would make sure it's max output. All right, so for this exercise, I'm gonna get on one knee. It's gonna be a bottoms up kettlebell overhead press, okay? Now the reason why I like the bottoms up, it adds a stability component, but also when I press up overhead, a lot of people, they'll press and they'll come like this, okay? I wanna press overhead and then also make sure my scap can posteriorly tilt and work on overhead flexion at the same time. And overhead pressing is often frowned upon in the baseball community. But in my opinion, it's essential because you're literally training the scapula to come up and around the rib cage and posteriorly tilt, and that is extremely important. So I'm gonna come right in here, okay? Bottoms up, press up overhead, make sure I really get into good overhead flexion, no compensations at my spine, come right back down, press up overhead. For this exercise, it's really easy to progressively overload. You can simply add 5 pounds to the kettlebell every time that you do it. And then for this exercise, I would do 5 sets of 5 per side, depending on what you have for the rest of the day. But this could literally be a main lift for you. all right? It just depends on whatever your training economy looks like at that time. But if you do it for 5 sets of 5, you got to really send it on this, okay? If you're not ready for that and you feel pinching in your shoulder, obviously bang this exercise. And then your best bet would try to do like a low incline press or a half kneeling landmine press, which is the next exercise I'm going to show you. There's so many different variations to a landmine press that you can do. And so I'm going to take you through a few of them, but nonetheless, for this exercise, the goal is to the same thing that we did with the overhead bottoms up kettlebell press. Is I'm trying to exaggerate, this is the split stance one, but I'm trying to exaggerate my scap coming up and around the rib cage and getting into good overhead flexion. So I usually add a little bit of a lean in there to make sure that I actually get that. A lot of guys you'll see press like this. Okay, when I press on this, I want to feel it come all the way up and around with a little bit of lean into it. All right, right in there. Now, the next one that I'm going to show you is when I'm down on the ground. It's a half kneeling landmine press right in here. Same exact concept, except now you can't bounce out of the bottom. So when I come up in here, I want to make sure that when I come down, especially if you have shoulder impingement, you don't want to come all the way down in here. Usually your shoulder head, your humeral head will just collapse forward in the anterior tilt, and you'll just be jamming that really bad pain that you already have in shoulder impingement. If you're going to do this, stop right around a 90 right in here, press up, overhead, come right back down, up, overhead, come right back down. Just like that, okay? For the landmine presses, again, depends on what you have that day. You can make it a main exercise with 5x5s, or you can treat it as an accessory movement with 3x5 and then easily progressively overload this as you go. So now we have Tspine rotations, okay? So for the Tspine rotations, I'm gonna use a band to pull me into an end range that I normally can't get into. My Tspine rotation isn't very good either. So if I just did it raw like this, I would only get up to about right in here. Really good Tspine rotation, you can almost see the sky and have your elbows pointed like straight to the sky. So what I'm gonna do here is use a really thick band, wrap it around my shoulder and try to get as far as I can. The difference though is once I actually get to end range, I'm gonna put a little bit of force into the band and hold it for about 10 seconds, okay? So you just wrap it around like this. Get underneath the band. Now this is a pretty tight band, so it's almost yanking my whole body back. So now as I start to get up here, don't let my hips move at all. I'm just gonna keep going. Let it pull me into end range, right in here. And now I'm gonna put a little bit of force into the band and hold it. Come back down. Get out just a little bit further on this one. There we go. Good. Out just a little bit further. That's about all I can do with that band. There we go. Oh, fuck me. All right, for something like that, depending on how thick the band is, now this is a really tight new green band, and when I'm doing that and I get all the way to end range, me just holding it there is difficult enough. So it's not like this really passive stretch where someone's just kind of passively stretching you back there. That band, because it's so thick and it's yanking me back there extremely hard, it's almost pulling me past my end range of what I can control. And so with that, there's a couple key things though. For one, we want to try to get our scap to actually pull back this way as we do it. So think about that scap kind of pinching towards your spine. So that way your shoulder's really locked in place. If not, and I just kind of come out here, I'm actually just going to be getting a stretch just because where the band is into more horizontal abduction this way, okay? And this stimulus isn't for my shoulder, all right? So I'm going to pull this thing back. That way my scap's locked in and I'm gonna really have it rotate my upper back because it's for Tspine rotation, all right? So for something like this, I would do 3 sets of 3 depending on how thick the band is and hold it for like 8 to 10 seconds. So for this one, this would be a superset for scapula cars. So scapula dysfunction is common with guys who have internal rotation issues. And so that dysfunction could be a number of things. Maybe it doesn't upwardly rotate around the rib cage very well. Maybe it just doesn't move very well at all. It's kind of stuck, slightly depressed. Maybe it doesn't posteriorly tilt. So for these scapula cars, I'm gonna get on all 4s. And I know you can't really see my scap, so I'm gonna really walk you guys through this, okay? As I do this, step 1 for me is I'm going to take my scaps and I'm gonna pinch them together. So kind of sink my upper back to the ground. Okay, now from here, I'm gonna take my shoulder blades all the way up to my ears. That pushes the scaps up. And then from here, I'm gonna press out, almost like I'm doing a push-up. Okay, that pushes the scaps out. And then I'm gonna try to take those into my back pockets, my scaps into my back pockets, and that pushes them back down. Then I pinch them together, and then I repeat that process, but now I do it in a full articulate rotation. So I'm just getting my scaps to wrap all the way around my rib cage back and forth, okay? You can go forwards, you can also reverse it, you can go backwards, okay, right in there. And this isn't sending a lot of force, it's just teaching my scaps really just how to move, that's it. Now here's the thing, this is why it's a superset. The very next thing that I'm gonna do is hang, which is gonna provide more force to them because I'm gonna be working against gravity, and I'm gonna do the same exact thing from a hanging position. So go ahead and come on over here. All right, so on this one, now once I stop swinging, all I'm gonna do is go up, back, and around. Same exact move I did on the ground. Now for a superset like that, really, it's not that stressful. You can kind of do this as much as you'd like. We're gonna keep the theme pretty consistent with volume. So we're gonna do like 3 sets of 5 forward and backward on the cars, and then 3 sets of 5 forward and backward hanging. And you can rotate through. You can do 1 set pronated, the other set supinated, not that big of a difference. So these are called Serratus Jabs, all right? Now my serratus is actually the thing that I'm trying to activate up here in my armpit. So when I'm doing this, I don't want my shoulder to just dump into anterior tilt and just mindlessly press this thing. I'm actually gonna keep my shoulder in a very neutral position. I'm not gonna tuck it down and back or anything. I'm just gonna keep it pretty straight right in here and make sure that it doesn't move. And then when I press this, I'm actually gonna slightly uppercut and then press across my body. So that way my scap gets up and around the rib cage. The biggest part is controlling it on the way back, making sure my shoulder doesn't just dump forward. Keep it back like this, come up and around. Again, this isn't a very stressful exercise, but you could do this for 3 sets of 10 aside, 3 sets of 8. And this is just some movement quality for the scapula. These are just rebounds off the wall. Now when I'm doing this, I see a lot of guys try to do rebounds and they're coming way back here like this to throw it. When you're doing a rebound like this so far away from the wall, you're not really getting an external rotation component, okay? So in this, I wanna be kind of free flowing. I don't care if my upper back goes into extension or not, and I'm trying to rebound this off the wall fairly quickly. I only got a 4-pound med ball here. Okay, so it's not anything that stressful. And I usually do this for time, maybe 3 sets, 20 to 30 seconds per side. It kind of depends on your fitness, on how much you can do this. If you're doing this, you're a little bit younger, you might only last 10 seconds with a decent sized ball, okay? But if you're a little bit older, 30 seconds should be no problem. All right, so on this, I usually try to have my hand on the wall, that way I stay in the same spot, and I just rebound this back and forth right in here. Okay, so for these are called shoulder taps, all right? We're gonna do a few different variations of this. Now, when I'm doing this one in particular, I'm gonna make sure that my arm just isn't straight out, but my scapula is also up and around the rib cage really far out here, okay? And then I'm gonna have somebody tap my arm right in here, trying to make it go all different ways, but my focus is to keep it in one spot right there, okay? I'm trying to stabilize my arm while he goes through and taps it. And he's tapping the shit out of it. There you go. There you go, Jonathan. Give it to me, baby. Give it to me, baby. There we go. Good. All right. So for something like that, you're looking at about 30 seconds, okay? Okay, now for this one, I'm gonna come up at a 90. My goal is to try to keep my humeral head in the socket. The humeral head has to have really good congruency in there. So while I'm doing this, I don't want my shoulder girdle to kind of bounce around with it. I don't want to dump my shoulder into anterior tilt, nothing like that. I want to keep this thing in one spot right here while he's tapping. I use this ball to add a little bit more force, so I'm just squeezing it really hard as he goes. All right, go ahead. There you go. Man, you're good at this. Flow? You're good at this, baby. Got a little flow there? Yep. Good deal. Okay, so for all these taps,
it really depends on what you can handle. You don't want to be sitting there dying, burning through it. I can do it for right about 30 seconds. Around 30 seconds, it gets pretty difficult right around in there. It also depends on the weight of the ball you're holding, how hard you're squeezing it, all that stuff. But generally aim for about 30 seconds and you'll be in a good spot. All right, so for the next couple exercises, we're actually gonna go through lifts and technique on these lifts. So I know everybody knows how to do a single arm row. The thing is, a lot of people do it in a way that is not conducive for if you have a shoulder impingement. All right, so generally a single arm row doesn't really hurt you that bad, but if you do a single arm row and your shoulder dumps forward trying to get as much weight as you can, that's not gonna be very helpful for you in the situation you have right now with shoulder impingement. Okay, so for us, what we're gonna try to do is more of a low lat row. We're gonna try to take the bottom part of the scapula down and back towards my spine as I do that. So it'll look something more like this. I'm gonna have my back foot really far back and I'm gonna have a little bit more upright posture. And I'm gonna kind of lean this thing down and back, just like that. Now, it depends on what you have for the day, right? So you could actually make this a main lift and send it at 5 sets of 5, or you could just make it as an accessory mobility exercise and do like 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 8, so on and so forth. But if you're trying to do like some hypertrophy work, you gotta make sure that that thing is pretty heavy while you're doing it. Here's the thing though, if you're going pretty heavy on that, you can't suck at the movement and just like swing the weight back and still have your shoulder going to anterior tilt, okay? At the end of the day, this video is about trying to take away that pain that is on the front side of your shoulder, so be cautious of that. The next lift we have is an Arnold press, okay? But again, we're trying to do it in a way that's conducive for the issue that we have right now. Meaning a lot of guys, when they do an Arnold press, they just have their shoulder really far out here. They try to bang it up into overhead flexion like this. They get upper trap dominant. They kind of just move their arm like that. They get stuck up there. That's not the goal. I want to keep this shoulder kind of down and back. I'm not tucking it or anything like that. I'm just keeping it in a good spot. And when I press this thing up, I'm going to rotate my arm at a 45 and make sure I don't get into my upper trap. And I'm going to try to get right overhead as I do it. All right. So get this thing right in here. Now with an exercise like that, could be a main lift, could be a mobility exercise. It really just depends on how you orchestrate it. But for the sake of this video, let's do 3 sets of 5 aside on that. That way you don't just send it overhead without having really good movement in your shoulder. All right, guys, that's gonna be it for this video. But like I said in previous videos, we are trying to impact the game at the highest level. And in order for us to do that, we need your help. So if you get value from our content, do me a favor, like, subscribe down below, share. We also have remote training options that are taking off right now. Go ahead and check the description down below and just click on that link and you'll be good to go. Thank you, guys.